Hi, everyone, and welcome. So, today we will be discussing the second book in the Manifest Delusion series, which is The Mirror's Truth. Now, in case you've missed it, last month we did the exact same thing, but for the first book in the series, which is Beyond Redemption. And I put the link for that video in the description box down below, so you can watch it later. Now, this is going to be completely spoiler filled, but before we get into the discussion, I'll let everybody who decided to join me introduce themselves.
I'll go first. My name is John. My channel name is Hey Y'all Listen Up. I read mostly classic science fiction and fantasy.
I am Steve from Steve Talks Books, and I read mostly dark fantasy and horror.
And I guess I'm Michael R. Fletcher, author of the book in question. I also read mostly science fiction and fantasy, occasionally wandering into sort of real world books, documentary kind of stuff, mostly for research when I want to know just how shitty people can be.
Well, thanks everyone for joining, and then of course, especially Michael. It's always nice to discuss a book with the author in question, especially if you like it. That's a big plus, of course. So let's start with that first of all. How did everybody like the book? John, did you like it?
I did not, because it's mostly, it's beyond what I'm comfortable reading. Now, I did really like the ending of the book, but here again, it was a bit tough getting to the end, just because. And here again, it's my reading taste. It didn't mesh very well with this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see if it's definitely a little bit darker than what I'm used to as well. So it's just trying and finding out what your reading taste is and how far you're willing to go, I guess. I have a feeling that Steve will like it, probably.
I love this series. It's funny because when we've been reading other books, and we read Beyond Redemption last month, and then I read a few other fantasy books that I wasn't crazy about. When I came back to Mirror's Truth and back to this world, it's like coming back home, and it's really interesting. I love the world and the characters and the delusions, and it's just so cool. I love it. I hope we get a third book.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. No promises.
Yeah. And Yuli?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it as well. I must say, for the first book, I loved it, but it was on the edge of what I'm comfortable with as well. But I felt that this one was surprisingly a little bit lighter. Maybe because I'm such a character-driven person, I thought that this was more focused on the characters, and it gave them a little bit of nuance, where you didn't really have the extremely dark characters anymore. You could see that they had some redeeming qualities as well. You could understand why they were the way they are. So that's why I might have been able to stomach it a little bit better in this one. And I love the character arcs for all of the characters that we had. So I actually like the second one a little bit more. And I was also wondering if this was a conscious decision to have the first one be more about world building and then the second one focus on the characters, or if it just happened.
It mostly just happened. I mean, the first book, I had the idea for the world, and so there is a lot of world building in that book because there has to be, right? Just because it's the Manifest Illusions concept is a little out there. Whereas with the second book, the assumption is everyone's read it already, and so I don't have to rehash all that shit, which gives me a lot more room to just dig into the actual characters. And for me, that's what the first book missed. I thought the world building was okay in the first book, and the magic system was there. But it really took until the second book to actually dig into the characters and what made them tick. And to have included all of that in the first book would have been just insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I thought that the first book was very interesting because you have that very unique world building and magic system, if you can call it a system. So it definitely needed that explanation. And then for me, as somebody who normally doesn't really read more plot-focused books, there was enough there to still keep me invested. But then in the second one, I was very happy that it steered away from that, because I wouldn't been able to enjoy it if it was just an entire series focused on plot. And I think that that's what I often have an issue with. If it's an entire series, it's just a plot, you don't really have the interesting characters. That's where it gets iffy.
Yeah, for me, I mean, you gotta remember, like, The Mirror's Truth was the third book I ever wrote. Beyond Redemption being the second book. So that was the third book I'd ever written in my life. So very much like early days, you know, steep learning curve on all of this. And for me, The Mirror's Truth, I mean, for me, what I love about that book is that was when I kind of figured out that the characters are the story. There's not like plot plus characters. It's you know, the characters are the plot.
Stacey still have the buzz.
I do.
I don't understand why.
Okay, I think it's the storm here. It's just messing with everything.
Hmm.
So I'm just gonna say it was. Thank you guys for inviting me to this. I'm gonna watch, and I'll be in the chat. But sorry,
Okay.
everybody, for the audio issues.
Bye, see you in the chat.
See you in the chat, Stacey.
She's always causing trouble.
Poor Stevie. But yeah, no, go ahead, Steve.
I was just gonna say I'm impressed that it's Beyond Redemption was the second book you wrote. What was the first book?
So the first book I wrote was called 88, and that later became Ghosts of Tomorrow. But 88 I wrote that in 2008. That was published in 2013 by Canadian Micropress. I think it sold about 32 copies, which was when I knew I was going to I am going to be a successful author. But I took what I learned from the editing process of 88, and I learned an insane amount about point of view writing, how to write tenses and stuff, and then applied that to Beyond Redemption, which was my second novel, which sold to Harper Voyager. But it wasn't until the third book where I actually kind of really understood that your characters, they are the story. You know, instead of having a plot and pasting characters into it, you figure out your characters and they really decide the plot for you. You spend less time sort of going, okay, they're going to go over here and throw the ring in Mount Doom. Boom, 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 boom. How do I get them there? It's more about, all right, now I know who this is. What would they do? And so the whole book it's basically, rather than a planned plot, it's a series of reactions. Each character is reacting to what they know based on their point of view, seen through their filters, their delusions. And that's the entire book. They decided everything. I had very little plot. The only thing I knew going into it, before I started writing, was I knew the very last scene. I understood where I wanted Benedict to be, and I knew that moment because something my editor said during Beyond Redemption, David at Harper, while he was editing Beyond Redemption, he said, it's like Benedict is the craziest one of the whole bunch. And I was like, oh, yes. And that was The Mirror's Truth. It all came out of that one observation from him.
That's interesting. I had the same feeling in the first one, he's the only sane one, which in this world almost means he's the insane one. So that was a twist that I enjoyed in this one. And the whole time I was thinking, because he is described as being ugly, so I thought, what if he's super beautiful? And it's something like that. So I was thinking the entire time, what is it going to be? Mm-hmm. And that was funny, because you could almost feel it happening throughout the book, but you didn't know what it was exactly.
Yeah, I really like the ending of this and that twist.
Yeah, writing that something. I mean, that's an insane scene. Like the whole thing is like this building to that last scene, and it's completely mental. And so like writing that is that's scary. Like going into it, going like, oh, okay, here I have this idea, and it's completely insane. But now I have to put my insane idea in your head, and then it's that's scary doing shit like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked how you knew from the beginning almost that it was all going to happen in that cabin, but you didn't know what was happening in between, and you didn't know how they would end up there. So at the end, I was almost surprised. Even though I knew from the beginning that it was going towards that scene, it still surprised me. That's what I really liked.
No one was more surprised by me. I mean, like, that was written front to back. There was no jumping around and figuring out stuff and rewriting earlier scenes to make it click. I was just like, it's going to end up at this cabin, and I have no idea how it's going to get there. And then when I sort of reached the end and it all worked, it was like, what? Really? So, I mean, that was one of the things I learned from that, or maybe learned, hopefully, was if the reader is surprised, sorry, got that backwards. If the writer is surprised, if the book surprises you, the writer, then it's probably more likely to surprise the reader as well. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you plotted everything out and then you get to the end and you're like, yes, this is where it should be. Yeah, the reader's probably there too, and it's kind of boring.
So Stacy has a question. It's actually interesting. Yeah, was it intentional that the characters actually made no progress in the book? They quite literally end up in the same place as they started.
Yes, absolutely. That was, I mean, that's beyond redemption. From day one, the initial spark for the entire Manifest Illusions, all of the books in that world is the characters are literally beyond redemption. I wanted people who weren't going to learn from their mistakes, who weren't going to be better at the end, for the most part. That's not entirely true. There are some redemption arcs within the story, but what I didn't want was heroes with nice hair saving the day and everybody coming out at the end with a big hug and everyone's a better person, because that just didn't match what I was seeing at the time in real life. It might have been a little dark right then, but it's where I was at.
And I did like that you explored belief and faith, and Morgan struggles with forcing people to follow him versus, it's winning hearts and minds or just having a mindless army. So that was I like that he struggled with that. It was it's an easy just to, okay, I'm going to snap my fingers and you're all going to follow me, or am I going to win you over and convince you that you want to follow me? I'm not going to make you follow me.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I liked, Morgan's arc, and I really do kind of need to write that last book to complete his descent, but yeah, we'll get there.
Stacy, I meant that they started in the afterdeath and they are back there by book's end.
That part, no, I didn't plan that. I just, yeah, that was purely accidental. There wasn't that much planning in the book.
It seemed like a fitting end for the characters, though. It seemed like and the characters are unlikable, but they're all interesting, and you kind of started. Now that we got a time to spend with them, I wouldn't say they're likable, but I started to kind of root for them. Mm-hmm. Kind of get attached to them.
I felt the same way.
Yeah, I think everyone's, no one's perfect. Everyone's flawed at least a little bit. And if you get to see past the sort of exterior, hopefully, even fairly shitty people, you can kind of go, yeah, I see how they got there.
Mm-hmm. So, John, did you think that this second book was a little bit darker than the first one?
I did. Yeah, I thought it was, and maybe it was some of the things that kind of bothered me in the second one. There were things that bothered me in the first one too, but they didn't bother me as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see maybe that in the first one you have Morgan, who is kind of pure still, even though you can see that some things are trickling in already, but Morgan is like the pure child. And then in this one, you can see that he's actually not. Like in the first one, you have the slaver and he's being abused by that slaver, but then now you find out that he's actually a slaver himself and that he's come to terms with that almost. So yeah, I can see that you don't really have those bright, shiny characters anymore in the second one.
So I'm curious, was it like specific scenes that you found sort of bothersome, or was it more of a like a story arc or the characters? Like what? I mean, I'm curious, like what in particular did you find like wasn't working for you?
Well, I'm not much of a character reader, so having the first or the good bulk of the book being that character driven really kind of hurt me with that, because again, I started to like it when Bedeck gets his army together. We actually start seeing that battle scene. That's when my interest kind of picked up. Was when we had, but really the scene that bothered me the most was Wickdick's torture scene.
Yeah, it was pretty nasty. It's not my fault though.
It just happened.
It's what the character did. I mean, she tortured him. I was like, I think you're going a little too far with this, but she wasn't listening.
And Stacy has a comment.
Yeah. So it was darker, but I think it was more of the darkness inside the characters you connected with versus the darkness of the world you accepted in the first book. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good analysis. For me, the torture scene was definitely one of the more graphic ones. But I actually liked that it was there because it changed Wichtig's character so much. Where in the beginning he was beautiful and he know that helped him forward. But then he was becoming more and more Bedecked, who he almost sees as a father figure. So I liked that change, but I can definitely see that it can be too much to read it.
Yeah, that's a harsh scene, but I mean, to me, it needed to happen, and he needed to come out the other side of that, and to come out changed, and then to you get to watch his struggle. Like, does it really change him, or is it sort of a surface thing that he's just getting over? And you get to watch like how it impacts over sort of a like a longer period of time. I love that. For me, that was a huge part of the book. Which is one of my favorite characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's for me a very dark version of Jezal of the First Law, who is one of my favorite characters in that trilogy. So I really like the twist that he has here, and that he's just a darker version almost. Yeah. Because Jezal also has some disfigurements, I think, in the second book, but it doesn't really go that far, and he's still pretty. With Wichtig, you can't really say that anymore.
Well, all of his self-importance was wrapped up in that, and it was nice to see him. Well, it wasn't nice, but it was interesting to see him lose that part, that he couldn't just, flowing hair and everyone adores him, and he, all the women go, everyone wants to buy him a beer, all the guys want to buy him a beer, and all the girls are hanging over him. So it was nice seeing that change on him, from how he handled that, going from being adored everywhere he went to, oh, this guy's disgusting. So how he dealt with that.
That came out of watching a sociopath sort of deal with that situation, more of a outside real life kind of thing, but was just I watched somebody go from like singer of a very popular band to kind of nothing, divorced, squatting in somebody's abandoned house. So I mean that's kind of where some of that came from.
That's interesting to see that it's actually like real life people are an influence of the book.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And Stacy said Wichtig had to change the most in the trio, but then he's gone. Thanks, Michael.
No, he's not dead. He'll be back.
And speaking of rock stars, I did read The Broken Dead from a collection of obsessions, the short story collection. And my review will be on the 4th of September for that story. But it is, I don't know if John and Yulian and Stacy, if you know, but it's a side character from Beyond Redemption and her backstory. So I really loved it. It was great to get a different perspective of that character from that short story.
Yeah, that was that Art of War? That was the anthology that was in first, I think. Crap, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that one was fun. That was I was told that to write a story in that world for one of the side characters. Yeah, that one was. Oh, you're still there. All right, we're good.
Yeah, I'm still there. My dogs are being crazy in the background, so I told them to be quiet.
I've got an electrical storm out here as well with thunder going on out there. Yeah, that was one of those rare, fun short stories.
Yeah, and there's more short stories that I've read from that collection. But and I was talking with Johanna yesterday. She's a booktuber, and she had reviewed Blackstone Heart. And I really loved that review that she did of your book, and she said something that I guess I couldn't find a way to express, but she said that you world build through the eyes of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a great observation. Is that something that you do purposefully, or is that just something that just kind of your writing style?
Yeah, no, that's I'd be taking too much credit if I said that's entirely intentional. But I know going into the book that info dumps are boring as fuck. You can't just lay out a paragraph of like, here's how my world is, and this is that, and here's how the magic system works. However, when you filter everything, like every little detail through one of your characters, you get two things, at least two things. One, you get to twist it so it's maybe not entirely accurate because it's seen through one character's eyes, and that means you get to show it a couple of different times from different characters and let them skew the world building from their own perception, right? So it gives you multiple chances to sort of achieve the same thing. And also it becomes seamless. I think the best world building is done when the reader's not aware of it. Like at the end of the book, the reader knows the world, but at no point are they like, oh yeah, the world building was, like when that info dump paragraph, that was really great. It's sort of it's part of the story. You work it in. That's the goal anyway.
So Stacy asked, I'm curious what this group thinks of König's or Failure's arc in this book. That's a tough one. Because we had a lot of him in the beginning, and then you just saw what he put in motion and what happened afterwards. But I think that in the third book we will see more of him and what's happening there.
When we see a third book, right? Like,
yeah.
Someday.
I know what the third book needs to be. It's just it's weirdly difficult to write.
Mm-hmm. And will it be a trilogy, or are you not sure yet if it will expand beyond that?
No, if assuming I actually write the last book, it'll be a trilogy and done.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someday, like other books in the same world, but it wouldn't be the same characters. But I would like to, at some point, write that last book. It's just I have. I think the book means different things to me than it does to like most of the readers, and the emotions I personally have tied up in the book are not super conducive to writing another one. I got to get past those.
Oh, wow.
Now, for König and Failure, I like that you almost have the exact same thing happening with Morgan and Nacht, I think that he's called.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also interested to see what happens there, because you can see that Nacht is taking over, but he does it in a different way than the new König. So that it's interesting to see he tries to work together with Morgan at this point, but it's very clear what he wants in the end. So I liked it that in the first book König was in control. Now you have Morgan, but you see that the same things are repeating themselves.
Yeah. It's with Morgan, that's a very manipulative relationship. Hopefully the idea is to pull it off subtly so that by the end of the third book it's very much a holy fuck moment. Hopefully.
And Stacy said I liked Koenig more in this book. He was still scheming, but a bit more bold.
Yeah, I think that's also fitting for his arc, where in the first book he thought that he was invincible and that he had everything planned, but then you could see that everything basically, yeah, didn't happen. And now in the second one, he's a little bit more, yeah, he doesn't really dare to do what he did in the first one, but of course it's also his reflection speaking. So I always did that, so this book didn't help.
Yeah. The mirrors. How did that kind of come to be for when you were writing the book, Michael? Did you where did the idea come from to have the mirrors and the mirrorists and?
All of that came out of research into like mental disorders early on for the first book. Like if you look in the glossary of the first book, there's a whole bunch of delusions listed that don't appear in that first book. But I got really interested in the idea of people's delusions regarding mirrors, and there are a lot of them. Are they like alternate realities? Are they different aspects of yourself, different personalities? And the thing is, different people believe different things. So if you have, a mirrorist, that doesn't mean they have the same sort of delusions that another mirrorist has. They all have, there's all kinds of different things that people believe. And so it really grew out of that. And I loved the idea of having, it was another way of looking at alternate sort of aspects of one personality. You had his doppels, like with Koenig. His doppels were very in-your-face aspects of his personality, his need for acceptance, his fear of abandonment. Like, they were very front and center, whereas his reflections were a little more subtle and working in the background. Yeah, I had no idea if I answered your question.
Just wanted to, yeah, because it's so, the whole world is so original and different and bonkers, the way I like to describe it. So makes me wonder a little bit about you, but
I'm fine. I'm actually like super happy.
So we talked about a lot of the characters, but we actually didn't discuss Stalin yet. And I liked her arc quite a bit as well. I don't know about you guys, but she was almost like a happy story in the book, and I enjoyed that.
what did you think, John, of her?
I did like her arc. I don't know if I would call it a happy arc, but it was certainly it was interesting. I'll say that.
She almost found love, I guess you could say.
Well, I think at the end she did. I'm going to
Yeah.
believe that until it is proven to be wrong, because she actually overcome her abandonment problems almost, where she set free. I forgot the name of that character, but the entire time and in the beginning of the book, she was thinking I should set her free, but then she will leave, so I'm not going to do that. And then in the end, she did. So I actually liked what happened there, even though of course it's done very realistic and it's not like happy and love story. But in a sense, it is in this world. I liked that positivity, and that in the end, the love interest actually stayed. She could have left, but she stayed.
I think it's funny seeing all these three characters being separated and somehow managed to, they all, came back together just because they all became kind of nostalgic and missed each other in a way. So they knew each other.
It was fun to try and I mean, the book starts basically with them, the two hunting Witch Dig, and they're like, "We're gonna kill the bastard for abandoning us." And to get from there to the end, where it's like they're sort of like forced together again, and it's the old team. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
How do you approach fight scenes? Sorry, comment. So I'm very visual. I write fight scenes by sitting in front of the computer and closing my eyes and playing out movies in my head, and then trying to capture like the important parts for the reader. A like blow by blow, high detail fencing kind of fight I find like just extremely boring. So I want the reader to do most of the work, most of the visualization. So I think for me, what I'm trying to do is capture key moments and then give the reader enough of the feeling that they're gonna fill it in for me.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger fight scenes towards the end, when you read them, it's almost like they happen in slow motion. Like it was like this big cinematic with the score pounding in the background, and really, this blow by these two heavyweights swapping blows, and so that it's played out in my mind like it was in slow motion, like it was a slow.
I mean,
knockout.
That one really had to happen that way because it's such an important sort of culmination of events, such an important scene. That one, like if you look at any of the earlier fight scenes, they tend to be fairly quick. Whereas that one, you're right. It absolutely is a like shit slows down. You can sort of, high def see the chunks of mud in the air and the, hopefully if I did it right, you're in there and it's muddy and it stinks and, very much so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that scene quite a lot as well. I'm usually the person who skims fight scenes because you almost know what can happen in some of them. You know who's going to be alive at the end of it and who's going to die. But with this one, you don't know. And it gives an extra dimension that you have that after that. And you know that you can switch to that place and also see things happening there. So that's why I kept being invested. And so I really liked how that was done.
What did you think, John, of the fight scenes?
I really liked the fight scene at the end. It was definitely one of my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah, same. Now we're talking about favorite parts. Did you have a favorite scene in the entire book, or was it just all awesomeness, Steve?
The fight scene at the end was one of the highlights just because it was so memorable. But the beginning, I think, for me, when we did our reading sprints, Yulene, when we started out reading the book together, the first few scenes in the book stood out to me more just because I remembered how much I liked this, even though it's funny. I feel weird saying that about a book that's so dark and bleak and hopeless, but I just love being in this world and kind of coming back to it. I just felt like I enjoyed coming back and revisiting these characters that we got to know in the first book. So my favorite scene was probably the fight scenes, but the most memorable that stood out to me is the beginning and failure in Koenig, and that stood out to me more just because of the feeling I had when I started the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it immediately gripped me as well. During that reading sprint, I knew like, okay, it's good that I picked it up. After the first one, I was thinking if it's even darker for me, I don't know if I can handle that. So I was really happy with how it began. And then the extra character of the mirrorist who is together with Bedekt, I liked her a lot. And how Bedekt was struggling with how he was feeling towards her and his list and all of those things, I liked that as well. My favorite scene is probably the grass scene with Stalin, and how the grass all of a sudden is something very strange, because I like the mystery. And I don't know, but you have like those small little beginnings, paragraphs, quotes almost. But you have one a little bit after that about tribes in grasslands and how they view cannibals a certain way. So I was almost thinking that something happened there at that spot and that was connected. I don't know if that was the idea, but that was how I had it in my mind. But I like that it was still a sort of mystery, and you just didn't know what was going on there.
Yeah, that scene was that was a lot of fun to write. And for me, it was very much trying to like set up and figure out the interplay between her and Liebendig, the other character she was with, the swordswoman, and like how they react afterwards and stuff. Honestly, that was so long ago I wrote that, I can't remember what the hell I was thinking.
And speaking of the, the beginning of each chapter, there's a few, I highlighted this one on chapter 33. I think a lot of people probably mentioned this to you, but the quote that's in here, it's kind of a long one, but basically, in a nutshell, if you are unhappy, whose fault is that? Don't like your life, go write yourself a better one. I thought that was it's funny how you sprinkle in these positive and funny parts in this world, and I think it needs a little bit of levity, but
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed that one.
And that's somewhere between levity and actual, hopefully good advice.
Mhm.
I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about happiness and how to be happy and how to be comfortable. And I don't mean comfortable in like a passive kind of way, but how to be good with where I am. And that, part of the delusions thing is tied to that, because a lot more of life is delusion, is shit.
Uh-oh. I think we may have lost Michael.
Yeah, I'm like moving around. It's not me.
Am I still here? Okay. If we lose him, hopefully he'll come back for just a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that most of us liked the book, but I can definitely understand if the issue is that it's too dark. It's true. It is very dark, so I can definitely see.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was two things. It was not my reading taste, and then again, the early character focus. I do need a little bit more action, kind of in between character scenes.
Change this. Okay, that's nicer. He's being replaced with a double. That's
Yeah.
not enough.
Oh yeah, thunderstorms in the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't write down very many quotes on this one, but I did. This was in chapter 36 that says, "Contemplation breeds melancholy," which sounds like a lot of truth to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like those quotes in between, which almost felt like philosophy that you had to think them over sometimes. The book is deeper than you maybe at first glance realize almost.
Mm-hmm.
I never really do quotes, but I like quite a few of them, especially the quotes in the beginning.
Yeah, I always like a book that has quotes at the beginning of a chapter. It's a little interesting extra that helps build the world and helps kind of inform, gives you a little bit of insight into the characters sometimes too.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny you mention that. I think I'm surprised more, especially fantasy authors, don't use that to help just sprinkle in lore or background without it being info dumpy. Just a quick little mention at the beginning of a chapter. It's a useful tool.
Yeah, like Jean said, it opens up the world because you had quotes from all different parts of that world that you didn't even know of in this book, but it made you realize, okay, this is a bigger world than what we are seeing here, and it made you interested in what's next. So yeah, I think that there are some books, but I can't really remember which ones that also have that, and it's always nice.
Someone mentioned to me that Tolkien does that. I don't know if that's true. Does he do that? I thought someone told me he did that in his books.
I don't remember Tolkien do it. I know Asimov does it in some of his books. The the Myth series by Robert Asprin, the one book I've read of it does it as well.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember of any others off the top of my head though.
Yeah, I'm also looking at my shelves, but I can't really remember. I know one, which is City of Lies. It follows a poisoner or somebody who proves food to see if there's poison in it. And in the beginning of each chapter, you have information about a certain poison. And that helps a lot. It's almost like an encyclopedia about all of these poisons. And even if they don't really have a meaning in the book, it's nice and it opens up the world. And Tolkien, I think that he has a lot of songs in his books, but I haven't read them, so I could go.
For shame.
It's been nearly 20 years since I've read Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I can't remember. Someone told me that, I forget what author it was, but it was a famous popular series.
So, question. Did you already discuss the point of view switching in the cabin later in the book? Long time since I read it, but I remember that being cool. It would restart the scene from each POV. Yeah, and then change how they view it. And here it's done well. There are some books with multiple POVs where it's almost redundant to see it from different point of views because they all view it the same way. But here it was nice to see because everything came together and you have all of these characters who all of a sudden realize that they actually love each other almost and don't want to do what they set up to do in the beginning. So then seeing it from those different POVs, that was done really well. And good point.
Yeah, and it didn't take. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I was just going to agree that it was done well.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't take, part of why it was effective is because it didn't take pages and pages to cross over. It would, paragraph or two, and then the story continued. It didn't take forever to see that crossover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it was an entire chapter just revisiting the same moment, it would be too much. But it was done very neatly, where you have just a couple of sentences, that's enough, and then the story moved forward.
Yeah, I know Michael had a commitment here, so he may not be back just because he had to run. But if he's watching, I want to say thanks again for him for joining us.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
I'm going over my notes, but yeah, of course we see a lot of Bedect's background, and we know what happened there with his father and then his time in the army. But with Stalin, for instance, I'm still curious what happened with all of her scarves. You still have an idea with her mother, but how she came to that point exactly, you don't really know. So I don't want to talk about it too much, but maybe it will be in the third book to focus a little bit more on that. And then we already know that he's going to focus on Morgan as well, which I thought was an interesting character in this one, because I didn't expect him to go that dark so fast. In the beginning, he's still pretty okay. He's a god, he wants everything clean and neat, and you see that he has some OCD issues almost. But at the end, he's using people and he doesn't really have a problem with it.
What did you think about Morgan, John? How did you see that character?
I guess I like Noct more than I did Morgan, because here again, Noct is his kind of, really his mirror image, and so he's the one that's dark, and he's really kind of the one kind of leading Morgan to do what he wants to do. Now, I did like that Noct made Morgan watch like the troops kind of cross and see the damage that he did to like the soil and just the ground that they were passing through, to see the destruction that just soldiers moving would cause.
Mm-hmm.
I like that Morgan had limits. He wasn't all he was only effective in a certain area. So I like that all the different, the delusions and there was limits to everyone's ability, so that no one can become this overly powerful force. There's limits to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And here again, he actually had like a limit of space too, because once he crossed the river, he only had the power that his troops gave him, not the power of his entire city-state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was interesting to see, because in the first one you knew that the goal was to get him ascended towards godhood, but you don't really know what that was. And I thought that he was going to be almost all-powerful, but to have him as an actual person still, it makes you question, is he just very powerful? Is he already a god? Because everybody treats him as such, but he's still a person. I like that twist where he's not just a god, he's all powerful, he can see everything at once, but he still has those issues.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting that he actually aged in those 10 years that, take place from the first to the second novel. Because typically you would think of someone kind of freezing in age when they die.
Yeah, it has a consequence. So he ages, but as a god, I suppose that he's powerful enough that theoretically he could live on forever. But how would that look like? That's an interesting point.
And here again, maybe he just aged so that he doesn't perpetually look like a child either, because it's a little bit hard to take a child god seriously, whereas an adult god you're much more likely to take them seriously.
Yeah, maybe he chooses to freeze at a certain time in his life.
That's a good point, John. I didn't think about that. There was just a page I had marked here towards the end, but I think he explores belief and faith a little bit in this book, with Morgan trying to decide whether he should force people to follow or convince them. But a couple of quotes here. But sanity wasn't real; it was a myth, a delusion, in a mad world, in a reality governed by faith and belief and delusion. What is sanity? It's madness.
Yeah, that's very close to Bedeck's arc almost, where he's the only sane one. He's not. He's actually the most insane one of the bunch.
Yeah, just really, really cool ideas that were played with here. And I can, Michael mentioned a little bit with, I can see him struggling to come back to this world just based on how dark and bleak and hopeless it is. It must be, I would imagine it being a little tough to write stories in that kind of world constantly.
Yeah, especially when he talked about his inspiration and how it's based on real persons. I can definitely see how that might give it an extra dimension for him compared to the readers, and he might want to go a different way, which isn't easy. I think it's never really easy to tie up a story, so I can understand why he wants to wait until it's perfect. And I also think that how this one ended, it didn't really end on a cliffhanger or anything like that, so it's a good ending for not having a third book.
Yeah, I agree there. It ends in a way that it could very easily be the end of the series.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Often the second book has some kind of cliffhanger or arcs that aren't really tied up. And I think, of course, you have this after that, so you know that things can move on. But on the other hand, you have definitely character growth, and you could see almost that certain arcs are completed. But on the other hand, there are still so many interesting characters that you could definitely write that third book. I also liked in this one that you have a dragon, which is like a super fantasy trope, but it's done in such a unique way that it fits this world. If you would have told me after the first one, hey, there's a dragon in the second one, I wouldn't know how it would fit in this one. But it's done very nicely.
Right. If you're going to pick to be a shapeshifter, you might as well pick a dragon.
Yeah, why not,
That's
right? Yeah, and the world and the delusions expand a little bit too on this one. So, like with the dragon, that was pretty. And the glimpses we see of him flying around and over the cabin, and all that was done really, really well.
Yeah, I agree. Those are also 3 new characters that I actually like, because again, they open up the world a little bit, where you have that one person from the tribes, and then it takes a while before you see that she actually went insane and killed her entire tribe. But I like that, because in the first one you had more people who lived in cities, and here you see that there are also a different way of society. And yeah, I hope that we see a little bit more of that, because that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I did like those three priests. Their kind of story arc, just seeing how they, how each of their uh, manifestations is different. And, how they play against one another.
Hmm.
Mhm. So, in general, is there a certain rating that you would give the book? And are you excited for the third one? Or would you read it? For instance, John, I know that you didn't like the second one, but if the third one ever comes out, would you read it?
I don't know. I gave it 3 stars, and because I like the ending so much, I've kind of thought about bumping it to 4, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to stick with 3, just because it was so hard to get to that point. I don't know if I'm going to read the third one. Maybe after I've read more books that are like this, somewhere in between. Because I do like dark books. I'm reading the Black Company right now, and
Hmm.
those books are dark, but they're not as graphic as these 2 books. And I think it's the graphic part that I have trouble with more than just the darkness.
Yeah, I can definitely.
That's fair. Yeah.
For me, it's often the other way around. I can deal with graphic stuff, but if the entire world feels very bleak and like hopeless, that's where I have difficulties. And that's maybe why I found the second book to be lighter for me, because I don't really view those graphic scenes as dark, and the world felt less bleak. But yeah, I can definitely see that there are two kinds of dark almost, and that in this one you had more graphic scenes.
Hmm. I'm surprised, John, that you thought about bumping it to 4. The ending must.
Well,
I mean,
I
because
I,
yeah.
I really like how you know bedecked, just the way that whole sequence of events. Um, it's just a really clever idea how the ending comes about. I mean, like I said, I don't know how close I was to actually giving it 4, but the more I thought about just how clever that sequence is, the more I kind of reconsidered it.
Mhm.
Yeah, for me that's definitely an issue, and that's why I'm terrible at rating books, because if it ends well, I'm always like, oh, 5 stars. And then I need to think again, like, I actually didn't like the first half of this book. I can't give it that high of a rating just because I like the ending. So yeah, I think especially like you said, that 3 stars for you feels about right. But it's good to know that you actually like that ending that much.
Yeah, I mean, I like it when there's a clever kind of turn of events, or sequence, and and that's definitely one of the cleverest sequences that I've seen.
Hmm. That's a pretty big compliment.
Hmm. So Steve, 5 stars for you, or
I'm gonna. I think it's tough when you have, because I love to be on Redemption, and it's tough when you have a first book that I like, kind of like Bloodsong and Tower Lord. When the first book is so good, it's hard to follow it up. I get this one 4 stars. I really liked it, but I wasn't 5 stars. No, it wasn't quite there yet. I think there were times when the pacing was a little off. It seemed kind of um, didn't go as quick as I would expect it to move. And the character stuff, while I enjoyed it, I need a little bit more movement in the plot. But I really liked it. 4 stars, a strong 4. I don't like giving half stars, but if I did, I would give it a 4.5. But I try not to. I try to just commit to whole numbers. So it's a 4 star for me. But no, I really enjoyed it. I really liked the world. And if anyone wants more in this world, like I said, the short story in A Collection of Obsessions is a side character. There's a short story of a side character in there. So if you're yearning for more,
yeah, I didn't even know that. That's good to know. Now, a quick reminder for me. So, John, I think that you gave the first one 3 stars as well.
I did. Yeah, I think I enjoyed the first one more, um, and the and that of course is another reason why I didn't with the second. Um, and I think again it was just, well, in the first one, the whole slavery sequence that really frustrated me in that one.
Mhm.
I think if that whole sequence had been either cut or much shorter, I might have bumped that one to a 4.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that that was also the one why I found it almost on the edge for me, too bleak, because that sequence was, for me, difficult to read.
Yeah.
And I liked how in the second book you come back to that, where Morgan remembers what happens there, and he tries, even though he's also a slaver, tries to make it a little bit better. So I like that, and that's why I thought that this one was maybe a little bit lighter in that aspect. But the slaver was difficult for the first one. And Steve, you gave the first one 5 stars, or also 4?
5.
5.
Yeah. It is very bleak, and I can see why some people wouldn't love it like I did, but it is very dark. So it's not. I realize it's not for everyone, but that stuff doesn't usually bother me too much. Was it the grossness factor of the slavery you did not like?
Partly, well, it was a big part of it. Also, part of it was Gahern's. I got frustrated with her being kind of unable to break away, because she kept having this scene where she knew she should break away, but she couldn't quite do it, and it was just kind of the repetitiveness of that kind of that bothered me. But I think the grossness, that it was a big part of it.
Yeah, same for me. I had an issue with it. First of all, because you know with Gurn, and you can almost feel that way, that you're being trapped there, and that felt very icky to me. And then also that you have all of those dirty people around, and the slaver basically torturing them for his own pleasure. That was difficult to read. But I can also see that it was done very well. That was just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, it is very dark.
But I think that I gave the first one at the time 4 stars, but I would do the same one for this, and I actually like this a little bit more. So maybe I would go with half stars, or bump this up to a 4.5. I don't know. I like this one a little bit more, because I like the characters more. But I think that the 2 books in the series so far has been very good. So I would read the 3rd one if it comes out, just because I'm so interested in all of these characters.
Yeah. So did you enjoy the characters or the world more, Yuli?
The characters, definitely. The world was very nice to read about, and of course the magic, but I always like to see how that affects the characters. And then in this one, you could see that very clearly. I also think that the magic in this one almost felt a little bit less important, because, for instance, you have Wichtig, who is somebody who wouldn't really care about other people. That was his whole character trait in the first one. That was part of his magic almost. But then in the second one, he starts caring about everyone, and you see that he has feelings towards his son, and he's afraid to go back, and he keeps fooling himself. And towards Stalin and Bedekt, he has feelings as well. So it almost makes you wonder, is he really that type of, or has he that type of delusion? Because he doesn't really feel like that anymore. So for me, it's definitely the characters.
What about you, John? What did you enjoy more?
I think I enjoyed the world building more. Because here again, this is one of the most unique magic systems that I've ever run across. It's definitely it's not something I've seen before. So that and here again, the more powerful you are, the closer you are to completely, losing yourself in it. The magic actually has a price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
How about you, Steve? World building or characters?
I think I like the world building, just like John said, because it's so original and different and just crazy, just so weird. It's like, it's so original. You don't see things like this very often, so I really enjoyed that. I did enjoy the characters too, but Swarm and Steel is in the same world.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I was going to ask, but unfortunately, Michael had other responsibilities. But I wanted to know if he had more books in the same world, because in our first discussion, he talked about how he takes things from real life and then enlarges it. So I also wanted to know about his other ideas and other books. I'm definitely going to check them out. Also the Blackstone Heart one, because Joanna liked that one quite a bit. So yeah, I'm going to check it out. Thanks for mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's another book that he wrote that Slowly Read reviewed, and I want to say it's Smoke and Bone. Is that the name of the? I'd have to look it up. But
sounds right.
That one sounded really interesting when Mark reviewed it.
I think it's Smoke and Stone, because that's one of his books. It's the first one in a series.
Awesome.
Okay.
Do you have to read that one?
Same. Smoke and Ash. I think it's all part of the same series, probably. You also have Ash and Bones, so.
Pretty close.
Okay, so unless anyone has any concluding thoughts that they want to share, I'm going to go to sleep.
Okay. Thanks for hosting, Yolene, and thanks, John, for coming by to chat. And thanks, everyone in the chat.
Thanks for having me, including me this.
It was really nice, as always, to discuss this with people who have also read it, because you have other insights, and it makes me understand the book a little bit better sometimes. And of course, if he's rewatching this, thanks, Michael, for, again, helping us understand what your point of view was. That's always interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I always like the behind-the-scenes information.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I will probably see all of you in another live show somewhere next month, probably. So take care, and thanks for joining.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.